We need to start by talking about Julian Alvarez, who's been discussing his future at Manchester City. He said last season, I was one of the players with the most minutes at City, but in the end, you don't like being left out of important matches. You want to contribute. I told Man City that I wanted to be here at the Olympics. I fought for that and I'm happy. I understand the club because we play a lot of games and they wanted to prioritise rest. Well, let's welcome in Nedum Onuoha and Mario Melchiot now to talk more about this. Nedum, he doesn't sound too happy here. Should he leave Man City?
Personally, I'd like him to stay, but I think I can understand where he's coming from because at the start of the season, he was, I think, one of the more regular starters. That's why he had so many minutes within the team. But he's right, because by the end of the season, I think Guardiola tends to settle upon a side or maybe 12 or 13 players who he uses in those big moments. And unfortunately for Alvarez, he wasn't a starter. And that must have been hugely disappointing for him because he was a big part of what led to, that back end of the season. And we've seen it many times. We've spoken about it. This is a World Cup winner. This is a Copa America winner. This is a league winner, Champions League winner. He's done it all. But at some point, these guys, they know they're good enough to play week in, week out. But unfortunately, for the way things are at Man City, there are a few people who are never guaranteed that. And unfortunately for him, the person who he's playing up against essentially is Erling Haaland, somebody who scored nearly 100 goals in the last 2 seasons. So I hope that he stays. I hope he can find more game time somehow. But I think this is probably going to be the start of a conversation for many people because for the options that City have in attack, I think this year there are going to be lots of disappointed faces.
What do you think he should do, Robbo?
I think he should probably go. I think he's a good player, very good player, and he's, as Nedum said, he's won all these trophies in a team sport, it has to be said. If I said he would be the out-and-out striker, without Haaland, he'd be the out-and-out striker for Manchester City, would he be good enough to do that week in, week out and make Manchester City the best side in Europe and the best side in the Premier League? I would have to say no, because I've seen him on many occasions be the out-and-out striker by himself, and I've been disappointed. I think he's done well when he's come on as a sub. He did well in those games when Nedum was talking about, and there was lots of injuries. But when Pep Guardiola comes to pick his best team, for me, and I think for Pep Guardiola, he doesn't get in that best team, and that's a problem for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when it comes to interest in the player, there is interest from the likes of Atleti, apparently, who he has been linked to. What do you do, Mario, here? Because we know Atleti, they're a team that do win trophies, maybe not as regularly as Manchester City, but he could be guaranteed regular starting minutes at a team like Atleti, or he could be on a team that win trophies regularly at Man City, but play the role that he's playing right now.
I mean, what the guys already said, Rob and Nate said, the perfect thing what we all want as footballers, we want to play. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes after a while, it starts eating at you that you win so much because clearly he has won the trophies that any footballer that wanted to be part of that, and then you come back to your team and your confidence goes higher, but you don't get the moment to start every week, and I think that is the difficulty for him. And I understand also sometimes when you become champions or you win trophies and you sit on the bench and you don't play as much as you would like to, you don't always feel as happy when you lift the trophy. I'm not talking about a World Cup trophy because that's totally different. I'm not talking Copa America, but even if you any title, if it's the whole season and I sit more on the bench and I lift it up, I feel different. So I totally understand for him. I understand if he wants to go to Spain because the way they play, the way you understand the team is set out, Atletico, I don't think it will not suit him because the way he plays, he never stops running, that kid.
We've just showed some of the stats there, though. Obviously, you're classed as a role player, but you're seeing Nedum, like the amount of games that he actually has played for City, how important he's been for them. So is it just coming down with Julian Alvarez to wanting to be first choice when it comes to these big games? Because that is still a lot of minutes for someone who's a role player.
Yeah, it certainly is a lot of minutes. But again, I think most of those minutes did come in the first half of the season when he was playing an attacking midfield, sometimes along with the likes of a Phil Foden. But as the season progressed and, say, De Bruyne and others were in good health, he wasn't the first option. And if there was to be a change, it wouldn't necessarily be him. There were times when maybe they tried to fit him into the side. Not least of all, I think he played left midfield against Liverpool at Anfield. It was a really bad game from him. I think from that point, I think Guardiola was just stuck with a side that he really trusted. He wasn't the only person to fall out of favour towards the back end of the season, but I think Mario has said the right thing. I think everyone said the right thing in the fact that as a player, you're best on the field when you're in football, when you're playing week in, week out. This type of thing even affects you off the field as well. Your feel for comfort for the city, and especially being from Manchester, all of a sudden those raindrops are a little bit wetter when you're not playing every week. I think these little things can make a difference. But when he's in the side and he's performing well, he feels good and he's scoring the goals and making a difference and feeling valued, yes, of course he'd want to stay, wouldn't be thinking about a future elsewhere, but that isn't the case for him. And some of those minutes, like he's played 50-something games, but minutes-wise, it's only ranked ninth in the whole team. I think that says a lot about the role that he ended up playing towards the back end of the season. Yes, he had big moments, but so did a lot of other players. And Mario is exactly right. Obviously, a team can win something, and we're not talking international sides, as he's mentioned, because there's a different level of identity to that. But a team can win something, but the way it feels for those who start versus those who come off the bench can be very, very different. And if you don't feel you're 100% part of something, you don't resent it, but it's not something you'll cherish the same way the other ones would do if you, say, played in the finals of those big games.
Let me just stick with you a minute, Nedum, because we talk about things that make a difference. If City hadn't come out of the quarter-finals in the Champions League, may he have seen more minutes towards the end of the season in the Premier League? Can things like this make a difference in how a season plays out?
Do you know, I think they could make a difference, but realistically, the back end of the season, all those key players for Man City were basically in good health. So as a consequence, Guardiola would do what other managers would do and stick with the people that he trusts the most in those big moments. These are the guys who've done it week in, week out, year in, year out for them. And they knew the magnitude of those games. At the final third of the season, you can't afford to have a bad week, because in a bad week you could get knocked out of the FA Cup. You could be losing behind in the league, could get knocked out of the FA Cup. So you stick with faces and systems that you know and you trust, stuff which you've worked on, say, throughout the season. And unfortunately for Alvarez, he wasn't a part of that. Like, how would it look even to us to see Haaland on the bench and Alvarez starting? You'd be thinking, well, is that going to be the right call? Okay, well, how about attacking midfield, where we've just seen Kevin De Bruyne come back in the second half of the season and finish with more assists than anybody else. You see Phil Foden, who's ended up being Premier League player of the season. Well, he's not going to fit in there, is he? Well, how about the left? Well, at times Doku's doing his thing. Well, on the right, well, Bernardo Silva. So all of a sudden you realise that he's not the first choice in any of those spots. And that's hugely disappointing for him. But I think when it was going on, people could really understand why that was happening.
Does Pep trust him then, Nedum?
Yeah, I think he does trust him, but I think he trusts 15, 16 players to be able to play in those big moments. But I think when you listen to Guardiola talk, once he has a vision in his mind of how he wants his team to play, he's very reluctant to step away from it. And he knows that playing Alvarez isn't an experiment, but it changes the way that they play. Not least of all because I think in the first season, for example, with Haaland, there were so many times where we discussed how many touches he'd have in a game. But his impact in a game at times can go beyond that because he occupies the two centre-backs in a way that, say, someone like a Julian Alvarez can't. So you have to decide, well, who's the team that we're playing up against? What do we need in this moment? And I think the way that Haaland plays means that he's going to be the number one, not least of all because of his goal threat. But Guardiola does trust him, which is why he puts him out there on the field. And I think we've seen historically, if he really doesn't trust someone at all, they would not have played the amount of games that Alvarez has played. But at times, he just has a certain vision. And unfortunately for Alvarez, he's not a part of that.
When I look at Alvarez, the top-class players, the great players, have one key aspect in their game that is brilliant. If you look at Kevin De Bruyne, he's a brilliant passer of the ball. You look at Bernardo Silva, can manipulate the ball and see a pass. Erling Haaland's a scorer of goals. Foden's got the ability to turn with the ball and get shots away. When I look at Alvarez, Mario said it earlier, he runs around a lot. And he works really hard. And that's a great attribute. But all the other things he's good at without being great at. And that's why he doesn't find a place in the side when everybody's fit.
Nedum, we have tasked you with putting together a Manchester City 11 for the coming season. I would like you to talk us through it as well. So let's see what you've come up with, Nedum, and let's see why you have done that. Talk us through it.
Okay, so with Edison being back in good health, I think he's still deserving of being number one, so he's in there. In terms of centre-backs, it was a toss-up, to be honest, because the Ruben Diaz could have been playing in that side. But having seen how good Akanji was for Switzerland at the Euros, and for Stones himself, we've seen him have potential to go into midfield, and I think if Rodri's going to be playing as a six, I think having one of those two going in there could be key. I think Vardy all finished last season really well. Walker as captain, he's probably going to start the game. Rodri, we don't need to discuss that. Then Foden and De Bruyne, if they're available, that's as creative as you can find. And I suppose the big question mark is on that left-hand side when you see Jack Grealish in there. I believe he's going to be playing this season with a point to prove, and I think an advantage that maybe he has is the fact that he's taking part in this pre-season. I think most people would have expected him to be at the Euros, but the fact that he's been there from minute one this pre-season, maybe building trust back up with the manager. I think Guardiola knows that when Grealish is playing well, City can, play in a certain style, which he likes more, that element of control. Because for as much as Doku's great in terms of attacking people, I think Grealish as well can be more solid in terms of keeping possession at times. So I think that's what it is right now. But I'll be honest, if people were going to want to fight me on that, I'd be like, that's fine, because they've got enough good players to where you can change one or two, and the momentum of the team will probably still remain the same. But those key positions for me, that midfield three speaks for itself. Haaland obviously speaks for himself. Bernardo Silva, you have to have him in the side. And yeah, I think there are probably 3-4 positions where you can maybe rotate one, maybe at left back for Ake, for Vardiol, Ruben Diaz coming in. But I think that's a pretty good team, to be honest.
Do you care to fight Nedum on Grealish starting?
I will fight Nedum every day of the week on Grealish. For me, Grealish, over the last season and a half, is Man City's worst player. Whenever he gets the ball, and I sometimes watch the games with a top-class coach who I used to work with, John Cartwright, and we giggle at the ball comes to him, and he never takes anybody on. He goes back to the fullback, he goes back to centre-halves. I've seen him in these 2 pre-season games. He's been given a start because everybody else is away and aren't there. He's not affected the game at all. He's looked as though he can't go past anybody. We saw the substitute come on, go past someone and get across into the box, a youngster. Grealish never did that in the 2 games. I can't see how he gets in Manchester City's best team. And I'm the same with the Stones a little bit. Stones was taken off at half-time in the FA Cup semi-final, and he should have been taken off in the FA Cup final because he can't run. When there's players that can run beyond him, I think he's a weak link for Man City's defence, and Diaz is a much better player.
Nedum, would you like to continue to defend your choice in Grealish here?
Well, I do like Doku as well, so if you insist on taking Jack out, I'm more than happy for the Belgian to step in.
Oh, it's Jack now. He's calling him Jack now.
Yeah.
Oh, suddenly it's Jack.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Jack Grealish. I don't know him. I really don't know him. Yeah, Jack Grealish. Yeah.
But what about what Robbo has said about what he's observed on him, Nedum?
Yeah, I think I can see those. I can see those critiques, and I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't seen every minute of the games that they've had in pre-season, so I'm not going to be someone that will say for definite this is what the team is going to be. But there was a spell, I think it was a year ago, when they were in that final bit playing for that treble, because he knows he didn't play his best football last year, and all of his England teammates, for example, said the same thing. But if he can find some of that, if he can get a run in the side, if he can be in good health, because that was another factor last year, then great. But I think his style of play, I understand why it frustrates some people, but the majority of City fans love him, and I think it's because of the stuff which maybe people don't see all the time.
Mario, where do you stand on Jack Grealish?
No, I like him. I think what the guys already said, I think when he came to City was, of course, from Villa to City was the moment that everybody agreed with that move. And he performed that. But then later on, when they won so many trophies and Grealish celebrated, it doesn't matter because everybody would. I would celebrate the same like him. But on the other part, the restart of him, of the following season after winning so much, I think that maybe, got the toll on him, that he didn't perform what he had showed before that. And I think that was one of the reasons also, because knowing Guardiola, he's very, really tactical regarding like, we win something, but we keep on going. And when he wanted to restart him, it was kind of difficult for him because some games he would come in and you could see what Doku was doing and how the battle was going on. Because Doku knew that now the challenge is on and I'm going to take it. And I think in that moment, I wanted to see a little bit more of Grealish to say, like, let's have it. And I felt some moments he took a step back. And I don't want him to do that. I think what Nedum just said, you understand, for him to push on when things are getting tough, that's when you see the best of him. And I felt like this season he didn't do that much.
Mario, you were a right back. If you were playing against Doku or you were playing against Grealish, who's never going to go down the outside of you, who would you prefer to play against?
Oh, that's the best question you ever asked me. If a player doesn't go on the outside, oh my God. I'm not a smoker, but if not, I would be smoking all day long. Because you have to take me, if you take me on the outside, you're testing my confidence. And the moment you beat me on the outside, I have a problem. And I agree, I know your question. Yeah, Grealish loves going inside. He goes inside so many times in the game.
Yep. See, so Doku is the more dangerous player. There we go.
But going back to Nedum's point about him having a point to prove, not being in the England squad, and using this season to prove that point, to prove his worth, what do you make of that?
I don't think you can prove a point, because I don't think when I saw him play for Aston Villa, I thought he was a top-class player. He was running at people, he was going down the outside, he was holding off challenges, he was running half the length of the pitch with the ball. He can't do that anymore. He's frightened that he's not going to go past anybody down the outside, because I think he's worried about his own pace. He hasn't got that burst of pace off the mark. So he doesn't go down the outside, so he chops it back onto his right foot and has to play the ball square or play the ball backwards. Every defence thinks, that's OK, we can deal with that. What we don't want is somebody to keep running beyond us. And Grealish, I don't think, has got the capability to go beyond anybody now.
All right, so it sounds like Robbo hates Grealish a little bit more than he does Julian Alvarez, Nedum.
Yeah, that's fine. I can understand those critiques of Grealish because there's so many times when he doesn't do that. And I think you're reaching out to see it. And I think it's been made worse in the last year because you've seen the sort of upside of a Jeremy Doku. He will take it to you for the entirety of the game. He will go outside, he'll go inside, he'll be going full speed, he'll be running without the ball. And it is the antithesis of a Jack Grealish, unfortunately. But again, I remember how he was in that season when they won the treble, and he was a huge part of that side. So as I say, I can't really let go of that. And I think for Jack, maybe what Robbo's saying is correct, but I think this is arguably the biggest season of his career because now he's out of favour in a position where previously he was one of the most important parts of what was an historic team.
Going back to Robbo's question to Mario Nedum, who would you rather defend against?
To be honest, I'd just rather not be playing against Man City. So overall, I'm happy to sit in this chair in my basement.
Political answer. I want the political answer.
No,
Come on, brother.
Obviously, like from a one-on-one defending standpoint, you just don't want to play against Doku, do you? Yeah. Because even though at times, he never seems to have the ball fully in control, it sort of catches you off guard. And I think for some of the old Premier League, like, purists here, he reminds me a little bit of Trésor Luar, because whenever he gets you 1v1, you do not know which way he's going to go. He makes the decision in the last second. So you're always thinking, well, he looks like he's going to go this way. Before you know it, he's gone the other way. But I think with Doku, he wants to get the crosses in. He wants to finish with a shot. And I think at times, Jack, he wants to control the pace of the game, which I think the manager wants him to do. But from an individual basis, you'd much rather be up against Jack than, say, 1v1 with a Doku. Although Doku, as I say, doesn't win all his battles, but he continues to fight nonetheless.
Now, Nedum, it's understandable that you haven't seen every minute of the pre-season, given the fact that a lot of it is over here in the United States. I feel like Robbo's seen every single second of the pre-season so far, definitely been at a few of those games. Oscar Bob, he's been impressing so far. Well,
he's the opposite to Jack Grealish because he's been playing on the other side of the field. He's a left-footed player playing on the right-hand side, but he goes down both sides. The goal he created for Haaland the other day.
Do you know, that's a real tough question. I think a lot of it depends on his own mentality in terms of can he be patient? Because I think we've seen historically, if you are patient as a young player at City, there will be an opportunity. But for others, they understand that they can go and be playing week in, week out in the Premier League. Like Cole Palmer is a prime example. I would like to see him stay because I think as it stands in terms of experience and so on, he feels like he'll be next to play on that right side after Bernardo Silva stops doing it. And if he can continue to gain experience, then great. And given the fact he's still a fraction younger than, say, some of those other players as well, I think he's a huge talent. City really do have a gem in there. But if it turns out that he isn't as patient as, say, most people would hope him to be, I'm sure he'll have a ton of suitors. And Robbo's right. Like, this guy, he's so sharp. Just look back at his first Premier League goal last season was away at Newcastle, scoring in the last minute with the touch, the drag back and the finish. Like, no moment is too big for him. And he's definitely going to be a star. And I hope he remains patient and gets some opportunities this season.
At 21, do you think he has time to be patient, Mario?
It's difficult. Just like Nedum said, I think, the unique situation in this team was Foden, of course. He had the patience. He had the moment when he was waiting and people were talking about him. And he held on to his confidence and said, no, I'm going to wait. And look what happened. But is Bob's going to be the same kind of thing? Because he's coming from a different country. He might not have that feeling in the sense of the connection to the country and the club. So that's why. And if you ask me, I was 21 when I went to Chelsea. So I'm probably not the best answer to say, would you go? If I'm not playing, I went. So this is my thing. But I was playing at the time at Ajax.
How important is that, having that patient aspect when you are a young player like this?
Well, I had no patience whatsoever. So I got in the team at Arsenal at 17 and stayed in it. And I couldn't have coped with being a substitute. I just wouldn't have been able to cope with it because I felt I had to be part of the team. And that's the only way I enjoyed football, by starting every game. He's at a great club. He's been playing with great players. He's got the best manager in the world. He's getting enough game time and he's developing enough. I think he can probably leave it for maybe another year or so and then have a rethink.
And then have a rethink. OK, well, we must talk about the title, obviously, because season hasn't even started. Nope. And that's where we're going to go. But before we do talk about that, just a quick word on Savinho. Obviously, with everything that is ahead for Manchester City this season, we're going to get to see a lot more of this player. Robbo, talk to us about what he can do for this team and what he can do for Erling Haaland.
Well, most of the time I saw him play for Girona, he played on the left-hand side and he's got great pace, he's got an excellent left foot, he can finish. Inconsistent at times. I saw him play really poorly on a couple of occasions, made bad decisions. But when he's playing at his best, he's dynamic. He's got all the attributes you need from a left-sided player. And he can cross the ball, he can whip balls in behind, he'll go past me, play little 1-2s. Haaland's got to be ready if he does play little 1-2s with him because he likes to bounce the ball off the centre forward. But he's a top-class player, but needs to be more consistent, which he probably will get when he gets that extra bit of development. Extra bit of development,
which, as we know, Pep Guardiola will do wonders for a player like this.
You'd hope so. You'd hope so. I mean, Pep Guardiola, I think 90% of the time, has great success of making players better. There's been one or two where his style of football hasn't agreed with the players he's bought. Think of Phillips. And I would say, to a certain degree, Jack Grealish.